y desde 2012 se incorporó como investigadora del Centro Alemán de Investigación en Educación Superior y Estudios Científicos. Desde febrero de este año es jefa de la oficina de la Comisión de Información de Investigación en Alemania de este mismo instituto. Hoy Sophie nos acompañará con su presentación Desarrollo de una clasificación de campos de investigación interdisciplinarios para el sistema de ciencia alemán, proceso y resultados. Este sistema de clasificación tiene como propósito servir para la armonización de informes y actividades de investigación. Sophie, you can start your talk.
Yes, thank you very much for this kind introduction. I will share my screen right now and start. Let's see. Okay, yes, thank you very much again. Thank you very much for having me here, and good afternoon, everyone. Yes, as already said, I have a particular interest in research classification, and yes, I also used to be a member of the advisory board that accompanied the most recent revisions of the classification of academic disciplines for the German statistical offices, and also I was a member of the expert group that advised the 2020 revision of the Australian and New Zealand standard research classification. So I'm very much interested in this topic, and I will also today present you a project that has or had the goal to develop a new and interdisciplinary research classification in order to better report on scientific activities, projects, publications, etc., in order to be better able to describe what is going on in research, and to really capture interdisciplinary activities and to detect them. My talk today is structured as follows. I will first say a few words about research information in general and research information standards, and also explain why standards are particularly useful and needed in federal research systems such as Germany, in a country where we have 16 different states that have, and we have basically 16 different university structures in place, but on top we also have the federal state that governs all those activities and institutes that are not within university structured, that are non-university research institutions. So we have a particularly complicated and fragmented system. And in this context, it is useful to have standards that guide all those institutes and institutions like universities that have to report on their research and on what they are doing. And if you want to compare all these activities and structures and institutions, you really need standards in order, to get comparable information, to be really able to say what something and what is going on in terms of research. I will then show you or explain why we need that, why we use research information, in which contexts and use cases this is important, at least in the German system. And then I will say a few words about the role of classifications in research reporting and also in evaluation, for example, of evaluations of institutes or research groups or even projects. And then I will introduce or say, explain you more or give you more details about the aforementioned project, which was to develop a new classification of interdisciplinary research fields, a complementary classification next to disciplinary classifications that are widely in use, both internationally and also in Germany. And I will explain you how we did that, which approach was chosen to really develop this new classification and the process, and then also show you the results. And I will close with a short outlook and a few links to that document the project for you also to see and check after the lecture today. As I said, yes, research information, let's just start with a short definition. By research information, I really mean all this information and data on research activities, and for outputs, for instance, of individual researchers, but also departments, institutes, or universities. In this sense, research information is not to be confused with research data. While research data, for instance, shows the content of research information is more the metadata on research and is more to describe the structures and the countable outputs that emerge from research activities and processes. So it is mainly quantitative information on, for instance, staff of a research institute, projects, publications, patents also belong to this group of information, or open research infrastructures that are offered by universities, such as libraries that can be used also by non-members of the institutions or universities. And all this information is widely used, as you might know. Institutions, not only in Germany, but worldwide, have to report on the activities, on what they are doing, for instance, to public bodies such as ministries or funding organizations. I also already mentioned official statistics. That is an important a task to really prepare annual reports, for instance, for all those entities. But also for internal processes like planning and evaluation processes, also outreach and communication, PR, all these tasks need research information in different forms, but they all need some information that has to be collected within the process, research information process. So, and also, why do we need standards? If we have to collect and process the data again and again for every use case, then the efforts are really high. Efforts with the collection and processing of this information. Standards might reduce efforts. So if we agree on shared definitions and approaches how to collect the data, the underlying data, then the efforts will be reduced greatly for all those that have to report. But also, if we are to compare the data and to compare institutions, for instance, or activities across different institutions or universities, then we have to rely on a certain data quality. And the need of data quality and comparability across these different institutions is high if we are, for instance, to use the data in order to make good political decisions and structural decisions also for these publicly funded organizations. Just a few words again on the German science system. I already mentioned it's a complicated science system, which makes it almost impossible to impose laws and rules that are valid for all research institutions in Germany. I already mentioned the states that govern the universities within their territory, and then we have the federal state on top that also distributes money mainly for non-university research institutions. And so we have a complicated system of cooperation and different distributed authority for the governance of these institutions. On top of that, there has been a trend since the 1980s in Germany, but not only in Germany, I would say even worldwide. Research institutions have become more autonomous, at least in Germany. So regulation has in parts become more complicated. And what is, in addition, third-party funding and performance-based funding has become more important. And the same is true for rankings and the need for transparency. Rankings have become more important. Also, universities themselves use them, for instance, in public relations to compare themselves also with others, with the peers. And for all these tasks, you need comparable information. And that makes it almost impossible to really get good information in order to make good science policy in Germany. As I already said, rankings and ratings and output-oriented reporting to ministries and funding organizations have increased simply. There are more reports requested from external stakeholders, also statistical offices and the Council of Science and Humanities and an advisory board in Germany. They request data and information. Also, performance-based funding systems have become more and more relevant. So, and for internal reasons, for strategic decision making, for internal governance processes, good information, complete information, quality assessed information is needed. So, and what happened? We have this fragmented situation. Everybody is doing what they want, but the need for good, for reliable information is there. Well, the German Council of Science and Humanities, which is an advisory board for the federal and the state governments in Germany, they recommended the development of a standard, which was called Research Core Data Set. The name is a bit misleading, but in fact, it is a standard, a set of standard definitions and concepts that makes a recommendation on what information should be there and in what way should the information be gathered and processed, information on staff, publications, projects, patents, etc. And after this document was published, this standard was developed by a think tank, and a set of concepts and definitions was there in order to standardize the processes and information system. But it was, and it still is, a voluntary standard. So given the difficulty for in the German science system to impose one standard top down, you really have to rely on all those that have to implement the standard and to convince them that it is a good standard. Those that have the data, those that have the information, universities, research institutions, and those that request the information, like all those internal and external actors I already mentioned, for instance, for the German case. So, and in this, and classifications in this context, and now I come to the topic of, or the core topic of this talk. Universities and higher education institutions also use these classifications to really structure the information, to aggregate the information, for example, the number of staff by academic discipline, for instance, for annual reporting to official statistics, but also to other, for other reasons or for other purposes. And this widely used classification of academic disciplines in Germany, which is very much comparable to other classifications of academic disciplines in use in other countries and science systems, is, for the German case, historically grown. And it very much is reflects the organizational structure of universities that are structured normally along disciplines. They have their chairs and department structures along this hierarchical classification. But non-university research institutes in Germany, they have different structures and also different mandates normally. They focus much more on interdisciplinary research that addresses specific problems or topics and not so much specific disciplines. And also interdisciplinary research in general has become more and more important. So you do not necessarily research a certain topic within your disciplinary team, but beyond disciplines. And to reflect this and to also be able to describe this type of research, there are, in fact, different interdisciplinary research classification, organization-specific classifications in use, not only in Germany, but also worldwide. And this was the point of departure for the project I would like to describe now. I, with colleagues from the Humboldt University, carried out a one-year research project to, in fact, develop a new classification that is interdisciplinary in nature and that allows us to categorize research along problems or topics it addresses and beyond academic disciplines. So we had 1 year, 12 months to develop such a new classification. We got funding by all main public bodies in Germany, that is the Ministries of Education and Research of the 16 states and the federal ministry. And the goal was basically, to develop such a classification for interdisciplinary research fields, like to show the disciplinary research fields to be used, to also categorize projects and publications and other types of research outputs these institutions might have. And we chose as a methodological approach, we chose an intellectual development of a classification via card sorting and a subsequent validation through an expert survey. Why did we do that? We might as well have chosen machine-based ways to develop a new classification. We didn't do that because we knew there are still different classifications of interdisciplinary research in place. These classifications work for those who use them. And we decided to take all these existing classifications internationally and nationally that we were able to get and to read and to match them and to develop a new classification out of these sources. And how did we in fact then do that? Just a quick walk through the steps we took. We started with the collection and selection of existing lists of fields of research. We also indexed DFG-funded clusters of excellence and collaborative research centers and grad schools. All these types, these are project types of mainly interdisciplinary projects funded by the DFG, which is the main public funding organization, the German Research Foundation, and the main funder for all research institutions in Germany. And they have some programs and project types that are by definition interdisciplinary in research in nature, and these are the clusters of excellence, the collaborative research centers and grad schools. And what did we do? We then, I will explain a few more details shortly, but what did we do? We had a lot of keywords which we then took as application of the classification, which we made then available. And also in the meantime, we managed to also publish an English version of the classification, not of all the documentation, but of at least of the classification. I will show you the links after my talk. How did we do that in practice? We gathered 27 lists of fields of research or interdisciplinary classifications. Of these 27, we used 21. Some of them were very rough, had only a few categories, which we then sorted out, because we had the goal of developing up to a classification of up to 100 classes. We had, for instance, as from the national on the national level, some classifications from the Max Planck Society that are in use within these societies or associations of research institutions. These are non-university research institutions in Germany: Max Planck, Leibniz, Fraunhofer, Helmholtz. But also, we also took the classification of the Federal Statistical Office. On the international level, we had the EU Horizon 2020 classification, with the new Canadian classification of research and development, the OECD fields of research and development, and others. We also indexed the interdisciplinary project I already mentioned, which were funded by the German Research Foundation. And we had a total of 275 research centers, 57 clusters of excellence, and 51 grad schools. And we took the abstracts, the project abstracts from the website, from the database that are publicly available, and extracted keywords from these abstracts. In total, mixing everything we had up to almost 6,000 terms or keywords, which were then the basis for our new classification. And we used a card sorting technique. I already mentioned that. In fact, we used Trello, which is not a software for this purpose, but which was suitable for our purpose, because it was in pandemic times when we were not able to meet in person and to write down categories on paper and pin them to a wall and then shift and mix and construct new categories. We clustered these terms, these almost 6,000 terms, and developed categories, main categories and subcategories, because the goal was to develop a hierarchical classification with 2 levels. We had 2 coders that worked independent from another and developed these main and subcategories from what was there. And we then had a process of iterative consolidation of the 2 classifications. That was done by 3 project members. After that, we mapped these two the input lists, or some of them, with a new classification we had. in order to allow for fast application of the new classification of those that have already another one in place. And we also assigned the project, the interdisciplinary project, the DFG funded, German Research Council funded projects to up to 3 research fields each. The resulting classification, the first version, had 13 main categories and 80 subcategories. We also provided additional information by means of scope notes and synonyms. I just give you a short overview of the 13 main categories that have 4 to 10 subcategories each and sum up to a total of 80 subcategories. We then presented this first version to different experts in the field. We had first the speakers of interdisciplinary infrastructures and universities, such as the speakers of clusters of excellence and the collaborative research centers and grad schools. We also had some representatives of non-university research institutions and universities. We also had the German Research Foundation for an interview, and a representative of the Federal Statistical Office. A total of 63 questionnaires were returned to our online consultation, and we had a total of 302 comments regarding the different categories. For instance, people that suggested a different label for a category, or a different category with a different content, different delineation of categories, and so on. We also asked for general assessment of the classification and asked for the need for classification at all. And also asked for feedback with regard to the assignment to specific research fields. Just a few results from our online consultation. We asked for the general need of such a classification because there are some, to be honest, not everyone is a fan of such a classification. And for that reason, we started out with a general question regarding the need for such a classification at all, and if it's worth the effort to develop and also implement such a classification, which I must say is an additional classification. And but most of the respondents agreed, we do need something like that, because interdisciplinary research is becoming more and more important, and academic classifications of academic disciplines are not enough anymore to adequately reflect our research. Then we asked how adequate they rate the classification that was presented in through the survey. That is the first version we developed and presented for this purpose. Most of them, really consider it adequate, but some also, large shares also neutral. So we see it's hard to evaluate. It's not that easy. One question that was very important to us to ask for the purposes such a classification of research fields might serve in the future, because to be honest, we started out without knowing for what exactly it might be needed, who needs it, and what would they do with it. Well, most of the respondents agree that the visualization of interdisciplinary research activities might be possible and is important. Also, the aggregation of interdisciplinary research activities that is will be possible. That is, with aggregation we mean, for example, University A has a number of 20 projects within the research field, I don't know, and renewable energy. That might be an example. But also the networking aspect is an important one, and also the prospect of more balanced reporting of research, which might be possible through this additional classification. Yeah, we took this feedback, as I already said, more than 300 comments on specific categories and input for concrete changes to the classification, not so much on the first level as you see, but we ended with not 13 but 14 main categories that had a total of 4 to 7 subcategories and summed up to a total of 72 subcategories. Yeah, in a way a little more balanced than the first version of the classification. Yeah, what is next? As I already said, I will give you the links to the English version of this classification, which you can then read and consult and also get back to me afterwards. Well, what will be done with it? We now have the feedback, we have a classification. We also know that such a classification will have to be adjusted regularly. Research fields change and evolve constantly, so we must implement a process of constant and regular revision if we want to really make it attractive to use this classification. And in order to do that, we will start a monitoring process of the first implementation of the pilot phase, one could say, a 2-year process in which we review the implementation process and look at how it will be used, how quickly it will be implemented, if it will be used by those that request reports and carry out evaluations that use research information and the data. We also will carefully document the use cases in order to be better, or to better know what purpose it might serve in the future, and in order to be able to orient future revisions along the use cases, the factual use cases. And we also will critically assess the usability of the classification, as I said, whether it's worth the effort for all that, for everyone. And we will also make suggestions for the revision, such as for new categories, delineation of existing or new categories. And most probably this will then open up a new revision or a first revision of the classification in 2025, or maybe later, depending on the first implementation process and the documented needs for revision. And this will be steered, this process will be steered and coordinated by the Commission for Research Information in Germany that Camila also mentioned already during her kind introduction. And to end today, I will also give you a few links. I can which I can also provide in the chat or somewhere else, or also I can also share my slides if you like. And please feel free also to contact me by email. I'm happy to hear from you, and thank you very much for having me here and for this for giving me the possibility to show you this project and its results. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sophie, for joining us. Para todas las personas que nos están acompañando, pues brevemente sintetizar lo que nos ha comentado Sophie, y es un proceso muy rico de crear una clasificación para campos interdisciplinarios con base a la información científica alemana. Esta información científica, como Sophie nos relató hacia el final, pues está en un proceso de implementación de su clasificación, que hacia 2024 se hará una revisión, se monitorea la implementación y en 2025 se hará una revisión. Sin duda esto es, Sophie, para nosotros en Bibliotecología un avance importante, porque las clasificaciones y los datos sobre los cuales se hacen las clasificaciones pues no están finalizados. Es todo un campo para seguir explorando. So, Sophie, we are going to a smaller room for questions. Si alguien nos quiere acompañar para preguntas en un grupo más pequeño, los esperamos. Muchas gracias, Sophie. Thanks, Sophie.
Thank you.
Bien, muchas gracias por esta intervención. Gracias a la maestra Camila Restrepo por esta moderación con la doctora Sophie Biesenbender.
Los saluda Alma Rivera de la Biblioteca Francisco Javier Clavijero de la Universidad Iberoamericana Ciudad de México. En esta ocasión quisiera compartir algunos retos de los repositorios institucionales en el contexto de ser cosechados por repositorios más amplios y el papel de los metadatos para abordar dichos retos. Como sabemos, los factores que influyen en la administración, gestión, difusión, mantenimiento de un repositorio institucional son diversos y complejos. Involucran a especialistas de diversas áreas. Aspectos como la gestión técnica, financiera, cuando se involucran fondos para consolidar dichos repositorios, por ejemplo, se ven acompañados de la necesidad de estrategias innovadoras para asegurar el poblamiento, el mantenimiento de las políticas, tanto a nivel interno como la difusión de las mismas para conocimiento de los usuarios y también de los creadores que depositan en este tipo de plataformas. En relación a los metadatos en especial, el tema de la normalización, el uso de estándares, el aseguramiento de la calidad para llevar a cabo cosechas exitosas y además para atender las necesidades reales de los usuarios que buscan y recuperan información en estas plataformas de acceso abierto, es algo que debemos estar constantemente revisando, analizando y tomando decisiones para que cada vez podamos ofrecer mayores y mejores servicios.
La web semántica se perfila cada vez más como una realidad palpable, si bien se ha optado por sacrificar la expresividad, es decir, la capacidad de expresar semántica, en aras de conseguir descripciones más sencillas, procesables por máquina a un bajo coste computacional. Parece un buen trato, si con ello conseguimos implantar una web semántica lightweight o ligera, que sirva como base para alcanzar mayores cuotas de desarrollo a corto o mediano plazo. Por ello, los profesionales de la información no debemos permanecer ajenos a estos movimientos tecnológicos. la comunidad bibliotecaria se ha convertido en uno de los pilares fundamentales del movimiento Link Open Data, datos abiertos enlazados, cuyo objetivo es compartir y hacer semánticamente accesibles piezas de información, datos y conocimiento en la web semántica. En el caso de las bibliotecas, con lo que se está contribuyendo es con los metadatos de los registros almacenados en los catálogos de las bibliotecas, lo que genera una masa crítica de recursos semánticamente accesibles a disposición de cualquiera que los necesite. Por lo tanto, no podemos esperar a que un día nos comuniquen que la web semántica ya está plenamente implantada para que empecemos a considerarla. Debemos contribuir desde la adopción e implantación del modelo no solo para reivindicar nuestra figura profesional, sino para convertirnos en elementos clave en el nuevo escenario tecnológico. No se trata tanto de estar preparados para cuando llegue el cambio, sino de actuar de manera proactiva para que el cambio llegue.